Dying Light 2 has two main factions for you to choose from, and each faction can affect the city of Villador in their own way. In this video I'm going to be answering the most common questions about this topic: which faction you should join, what are the rewards, how each faction affects the story. But before I continue with the video, I'd like to ask you guys to please leave a like if you found it useful, and to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any new uploads. About 90% of you are not subscribed to my channel, and I'm hoping to get to 100,000 subscribers as my New Year's resolution. So if you guys could subscribe, it would mean a lot to me. But with that being said, let's get right into the video. Now in Dying Light 2, you've got two main factions to pick from. You've got the Survivors and the Peacekeepers. Each one gives you a different type of reward and can open up different types of side quests. Now to answer the main question, how does this affect your story? Well, it technically doesn't. You see, when you first get into Villador, only one of these towers actually matters, and that's the first water tower. If you give the water tower to the Peacekeepers, you lose the Bazaar, which is a very, very important safe zone. So if you give it to the Peacekeepers, you not only lose the safe zone, but you can also get a bad ending. Other than that, the other outposts do not matter. Now to tell you guys what you should do at the beginning of the game, I recommend giving the first water tower to the Survivors, and then giving the rest of the other outposts to the Peacekeepers. And I'll tell you guys the reason in a second, but first, let's go over the rewards, starting off with the Peacekeepers. Now how you unlock these rewards is by giving water towers and electrical stations to the Peacekeepers. The first reward you get are car traps. What these are like explosive cars that you can activate. When you activate one of these car traps, it'll sound an alarm, bringing infected around it and then exploding. This can work as a great distraction for enemies or if you're trying to get away from infected. The next reward is going to be a PK Razor Cannon. These things are actually very, very useful. They pretty much one-shot any kind of enemy, and if you're lucky you can actually use these during encounters and manage to kill all your enemies very quickly. So the second reward is actually very, very good. Now the third reward is going to be the electrical traps. Now what these are just platforms that you can activate and will shock enemies. This can be good if you're trying to get away from a horde or if you just want to be able to kill certain enemies that are standing on top of them. So yeah, once again, very useful, and I really love this trap. Now on to the main reason why I think there should be two playthroughs and that the first one should be the Peacekeepers. On the fourth reward, you get this PK crossbow. Now if you don't have a crossbow from the bundles, this thing can be very useful. You get a semi-automatic crossbow along with a bunch of elemental bolts. Getting this early on in the game can be amazing, since this gives you the option of killing enemies from a distance. When the game first came out, this was the first thing I got and it was amazing. I pretty much only ever used this thing, and until today I still use ranged weapons a lot. So if you're just now starting off, or you don't have any other crossbow, I recommend getting this one. And also when you get this crossbow, it'll be in your stash and it'll stay with you forever. Meaning that when you do a New Game Plus, you'll still have this and you won't have to give the Peacekeepers these water towers or power plants. So for your first playthrough, I recommend getting this crossbow. Next up we have Molotov lanterns. Now to be honest, I'm not really too big of a fan of these since you pretty much have to use a projectile to knock these down. And even when you do, it's only like a fire effect and doesn't usually kill the enemies. They just weaken them a lot. So yeah, overall this one isn't all that great. But they are placed in some very convenient locations that will allow you to weaken your enemies. So I guess overall it isn't too bad. Especially since some of these you can actually find in GRE anomalies. But I don't really find myself using them all that often. I just rather use a sword or anything else and just kill infected without having to use this lantern. Up next we have the pendulum trap. Now this one can be kind of good since when you drop it, it goes back and forth a lot. But as you can see, it doesn't really deal a lot of damage. And you can actually get hurt by this yourself. There's also a trick where you can stand on top of it and then not get hit, but you also need to pay attention and try to move around so that you don't get hit. Now not to say it's completely useless, but I would have preferred a much better trap than this. Now one of my favorite traps is the UV trap. What this does is pretty much shine UV light, stopping enemies from attacking you, giving you UV light to replenish your meter, and just gives you an easy escape. Now keep in mind, all these traps will only be available in the PK areas. So if you're in an area that's not controlled by the PK, you will not have any of these traps. So as you can see, all these traps and all these rewards are mainly for people who are good at combat. These traps and rewards are for those who like to fight and stand their ground. They'll help you survive the night by fighting the infected and dealing with the enemies in an offensive way. Now moving on to the Survivors. The first reward will be zip lines. Now early on in the game, this is extremely useful since you can't really get around the city all that well. and taking a zipline down is actually faster than using a paraglider. But once again, if you have this early on in the game, you'll get through the city a whole lot faster. Second reward will be airbags. These allow you to jump up to higher elevations. They're practically one of my favorite rewards to get in the game, and to also use. Next up, we have the landing bags. These landing bags allow you to get down from higher places without taking damage, and creates a smoke that'll block enemies' vision and allow you to escape a lot easily. In my opinion, I don't really use this all that often or ever, but it's still a useful thing to have for new players. Next up, we have Survivor Revival. Now what this does is it allows you to be picked up by a survivor near where you died. So if you die, you'll be picked up by a survivor near the location where you died. Now to me this isn't too useful, but I'm sure for those who are new to the game, this can help them complete certain missions without having to travel a long distance. Up next we have air vents. Now what this does is that it improves the air vents so that they push you up higher, which can be very useful if you're trying to get to higher elevation, or if you simply want to be using the paraglider a lot more. Now I've noticed that when I've got this, the number of air vents increased, so it doesn't say it here, but I think it's one of the pros. And having air vents around really help you with certain missions. It also helps you get these windmills. So getting these quickly can be very useful and very time efficient. Now on to my favorite reward in the game, the upgraded airbags. These things are so much fun to use. As opposed to the other airbags, these actually push you up way higher, which makes escaping so much easier, and just take a look, this is so much fun to do. And lastly, we have the two-way zip lines. Now what this does is that this allows you to use a zipline to get to higher elevation. Now it is kind of slow when going up, but it does help you get up to higher elevation without having to struggle too much. This makes it super easy for you to get around the city without struggling. And in my opinion, is a very versatile tool to use if you don't have an upgraded paraglider or an upgraded grappling hook. Now to sum up, I think you guys should start off the game by giving the first water tower to the survivors, just so that you don't lose the bazaar. And then giving the rest of them to the PKs, just so you can get the crossbow. But if you already have a crossbow, then I recommend just giving it all to the survivors. And just some final tips, you will not have all these traps available in all the locations. Like some locations will only have 6 or 7 of them, but overall you'll have most of them to use. Same thing goes for both the Peacekeepers and the survivors. And the difference between those two factions, the Peacekeepers are mainly for combat and the survivors are mainly for maneuverability, getting around the city, and just parkour, you know, that kind of stuff. But that's it for the video. If you guys want to check out the bundles that Dying Light 2 has, check out this playlist right here. But if you simply want the most useful Dying Light 2 videos, check out this playlist instead. It's got glitches, exploits, tips and tricks, everything you possibly need to become the best player in Dying Light 2. But yeah, that's it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to leave me a like, subscribe to the channel, and try to help me to get to 100,000. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Peace.